Cash run man, got daddy. Big tunes, got the club banging. Less man, more buddies. What's that? It's a drop top caddy.
Hello, and welcome to this week's segment of On the Couch. Now, today I'll be discussing the idea of failure. But before I do that, let's take a quick recap as to what we discussed over the past few weeks. We started off with success, where we said success was three things. The first being success is in trying, success is in doing, and success is a personal standard. Then we moved on to the idea of fear, where fear presented in two ways: either face everything and rise, or forget everything and run. In this week's segment, we'll be talking about failure. Sit back, take a deep breath. In today's segment, we'll be discussing the idea of failure. The core word here is fail. So I decided to look through the Urban Dictionary to understand the interpretational understanding of the word failure. And one thing that came up that was quite interesting was the two definitions or the two descriptions of failure. The first one was to neglect to do something. And the second one was to be unsuccessful in achieving one's goals. Now, the first one, to neglect to do something, speaks of an unwillingness or perhaps even a fear to engage in failure. The second one, on the other hand, speaks of a willingness. So one is a bit more of a cautionary approach to failure, and the other one is more of an aggressive approach to failure, where one is saying, I'm willing to try. So I'd like to discuss that with you today, keeping in mind that I'll be focusing more on the second definition because I feel that that's very relevant. The first one being the neglect to do something. I think it's an interesting one because that speaks of a scary definition. Now, for me, the reluctance to do something feels like you know deep inside that you should be doing something. You know that you want to do it, but you're procrastinating and allowing your mind to marinate as to why you shouldn't be doing it. So personal justification as to why you shouldn't do it. And that fear in itself, I think, is very crippling because it allows the mind to start engaging with failure from a fear point of view. It starts looking at failure and having fears around failure where, like the acronym like we discussed last week, forget everything and run, where you're forgetting what you want to do and you're engaging yourself in the fear of failure as opposed to the potential benefits that come from it. Now, for me, again, this understanding of failure, from that point of view where you're reluctant to try something, feels very much like you're sitting saying, I'm going to sit in my comfort zone and not step out because I'm afraid that I'm going to fail. Now, that in itself is quite damaging because the first person you're failing is yourself. And ultimately down the line, others, but primarily the first point of failure is yours. Where this becomes a little bit concerning for me is that, in my personal opinion, I believe that we all fail in life at some point. The question though becomes, what are you going to do about that failure? Are you going to let it define you, or are you going to rise out of that fear? You see, I came up with a quote the other day when I was reflecting on this idea. Understanding that cowering away from failure also means distancing yourself from success. Cowering away from failure also means distancing yourself from success. Keep that in the back of your mind. The second point that I found quite interesting in the definition was that to be successful, unsuccessful in achieving one's set goals. So the goals that you're supposed to set for yourself, you're unsuccessful in achieving them, and then that results in failure. But for me, this speaks of the idea that at least you've set goals and you've tried it out and you failed. Now, it reminds me of an acronym that I came across for fail, which says first attempt in learning. The willingness to fail speaks of a learning process, speaks of a willing process to learn out of failure, where the first attempt of learning where you fail is a process in which you attempt to learn to do better. Now, as an entrepreneur, I found myself, going through various examples, various times of failure. But it reminds me of a quote by Virgin Sir Richard Branson that said, "Failure is a wonderful way of learning. If you're not taking risks, you're not achieving anything. If you give something a go and it doesn't work out, you certainly haven't failed. You have just learned." Now, the recording of this segment was a goal that I set for myself a few weeks ago. And about 24 hours before I had to post this, I hit a mental block or a blank, mental state. And I was wondering, what should I do? What should I not say? And so I went to my wife and said to her, listen, I have a feeling that this segment, this last episode here, this episode on failures is going to be an epic fail. And I don't know how I'm going to approach it because I've got a mental block. And after listening to me whine and moan for about 2 minutes, she decided to respond. She said to me, you know what? And she said something very powerful to me. She said, I think what you're doing has potential to be brilliant, but you will never experience that unless you allow yourself to be awful. Unless you're willing to experience failure, you will never experience success. Now, that was quite deep for me. I thought, man, okay, so I do need to get it out there. Even if it's awful, maybe try and get it out there. And that speaks into that, the willingness to try to fail, willingness to try and put yourself out there. So I decided, okay, let me try and be awful and record this thing nonetheless and put it out there. So here it is. So I guess the question becomes, how does this apply to you? As you listen, what does this mean for you? Perhaps you're finding yourself in a situation where you think to yourself, I've got a few things that I've always wanted to do, and I believe that I'm still capable of doing or would like to revive. But the fear of failure is something that's actually, crippling you, and is, the reluctance to fail perhaps is even worse. And so, I think it's important to remember that if you don't allow yourself to try something, you're not only cheating others, but you're also cheating yourself. By cheating yourself, I mean, you've got to look at yourself in the mirror every morning. But by allowing yourself to experience failure, by being willing to try and learn from your failure, you also provide other learning opportunities for others. By sharing your journey of failure, you also perhaps out there are able to encourage somebody who's at a crossroad thinking, what do I do and how do I engage with my failure? This is what I'm hoping that the segment will do. This is what I'm hoping that this episode will do for you. Perhaps allow you to think from a failure point of view. Have I experienced failure? How have I interpreted failure? Has failure crippled me? Has failure inspired me? Understand that it is okay to fail. What's not okay is not to try. Because as we spoke about initially, that success is in the trying, success is in the doing, and success is a personal standard. But you need to be willing to overcome that fear, because you need to be willing to say, I'm going to face everything and rise, as opposed to forget everything and run. I'm hoping that this segment has been very useful to you from a reflection point of view. Stick around next week as I discuss the topic of ambition. That's going to be quite an interesting one because actually I don't know how that's going to go. But thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you have a good one. Cheers.